For those of you who weren't here last week, we began a series of sermons where we are using and referring to the Daniel Plan. The Daniel Plan talks about living healthy lives in 5 different aspects. Last week we talked about faith. Today we're going to talk about food. In the future weeks we'll talk about fitness and focus and friends. In addition to the sermons, there are also small groups. They are listed in your bulletin. There's several groups. There are daytime groups, evening groups. You find one that works for you. Those groups will look at a video. They'll talk about the video. They'll also talk about the sermon as they find ways to live more healthy. Now, I have to tell you, when I first heard about the Daniel Plan, I thought it was about a diet and wondered what it was going to tell me I couldn't eat. And so I immediately went to the last chapter to find out what the menu plans would look like so I'd know what kind of diet this was. You may be skeptical yourself. You may be holding back. If you've not joined a group, I want to assure you that's not what it's about. In fact, food is only one of the different facets that we're going to talk about, and you get to choose which of those you want to work on. You may want to work on a different one each week, or you may want to work on the same one for the whole 6 weeks. But even if you decide to focus on food, what I want you to hear today is it's not about limitations and restrictions. It's about recognizing God's abundance. And so today's text really is an appropriate one to talk about that kind of abundance from the 2nd chapter of John. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother said to him, "They don't have any wine." Jesus replied, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? My time hasn't come yet." His mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby were 6 stone water jars used for the Jewish cleansing ritual, each able to hold about 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some from them and take it to the head waiter." And they did. The head waiter tasted the water that had become wine. He didn't know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The head waiter called the groom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first. They bring out the second-rate wine only when the guests are drinking freely. You kept the good wine until now." This was the first miraculous sign that Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Amen. Yeah, I love this story of the wedding feast. And I know some people think of it as a miracle, the first miracle Jesus performs, but the narrator doesn't call it a miracle, he calls it a sign. And there is a difference. I think too often we want it to be a miracle. We want Jesus to be the hero, someone who can turn stones into bread or water into wine. We want someone who can come and change our circumstances. And it's not that God can't do that, not that Jesus doesn't do that. But by referring to it as a sign, John is reminding us of the purpose or the meaning behind this miracle. If you were at that wedding feast, you would have known what everybody else knew. The last bottle of wine had just been opened. The party's about ready to end. You would have looked around and thought, "Oh no, there's none left." You would have been thinking in terms of scarcity, of a limited supply of whatever is there. It's that fear of running out that leads to a crisis where Jesus and his mother Mary intervene. But they recognize what the others don't, that God didn't create the world with a sense of scarcity. God created with a sense of plenty and abundance. I mean, did you notice how many jars there were stone jars? Or how big they were? 6 stone jars, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Now, I don't know how much the stone jars themselves weighed when they were empty, but I remember from high school, a pint's a pound the world around. A gallon of water is 8 pounds. That means it's 160 pounds on the light end, not counting the jar. So if you figure 200 pounds per jar, this is a heavy jar of water. It's going to take 2 or 3 people to move it. Now, typically, these purification jars would be near the door, the entrance of the house. Can you imagine what it would look like to take 6 of these big, heavy jars into the kitchen to fill them up with wine? It's more likely they left them where they were and they went to the well and filled them up one pitcher at a time. I don't know how big the pitcher was, but a good-sized pitcher would be 2 gallons. That means 10 or 15 times for each of those jars, a servant, I don't know how many servants there were, but they were coming through the house, pouring it into the jar. 60 or 70 times, all of the guests hear the water splashing from the pitcher into the jar. Nobody in that room could ignore what was going on. Now, they don't know what the water is for, but everybody knows that's a lot of water. A whole bunch of water. Lest we miss the point, this is about God's abundance. These guys came and go 60 or 70 times. There's a lot of water in those jars. It's about abundance. When God created the world, God told the first man and woman in the garden they could eat anything they wanted except for 2 trees. I went looking. God doesn't name the other trees. It just says every beautiful tree, apple trees, pear trees, peach trees, fig trees, coconut trees. I'm going to assume that based on the kind of discussion God is having, it includes vines and grapes and figs and strawberries and carrots, wheat. Everything that grows is available to eat. But we're like those first 2 people in the garden. We look at the limitations instead of the abundance. I mean, if God were going to list the whole list of all the things that are available to eat, and we compared it to the 2 things they couldn't, it would look like a pretty large list of things available. But we look at the 2 we can't. Which is what the people were doing in Cana. They're looking at the empty jars instead of the full jars. It's what a lot of people do with the Daniel plan. We think it's about what we can't eat instead of what is available for us to eat. The truth is that God has created the world with a sense of abundance, more than we can imagine. And along with that abundance, there is a sense of variety. And we in our country are blessed to be able to have all of that available to us. We can buy anything we want in the store. We even get fruits and vegetables that are no longer in season. We really are incredibly blessed with a sense of variety and abundance. By the way, as an aside, if we learn to eat more local, it would be healthier for us and for the environment. I mean, there would be less spoilage, eating food from the field to the fork, as some people say it. If we went from the field to the fork, we would have less spoilage. There'd be less cost of transportation, less fuel being burned. We would be healthier, and so would our world. We might have to eat more like our grandparents ate, where we ate things in season. But we would be doing so much better for us and for our world. But we have more than we need. And we can get anything we want. The only limitation is what's available in the stores. And yet we wind up eating more than we need. The Daniel plan starts with an assumption that there is an abundance, that anything God creates is available to be eaten. In fact, the only 3 restrictions the Daniel Plan puts on our diet are 3 things that aren't found in nature. They're manufactured foods. Those 3 things are high fructose corn syrup, trans fats, and MSG. In other words, if we remember that whatever God makes is good for us, and what we have produced and manufactured needs to be eaten with suspicion, we'll be healthier. Variety makes us healthier too. So eating a variety of foods and a variety that God has provided is good for us. I mean, sometimes we forget that food is an energy source. I remember one of the first times I made an awareness that from my high school physics about what a calorie is, and realize it really is a measure of energy. Food is our energy source. It's the fuel for our bodies. It's what makes our hearts beat. It's what allows us to do complex math problems. It's what allows us to run a marathon. It's fuel for our body. But sometimes we eat the wrong fuel. None of us here would use vegetable oil in our car or use paper towels in our furnace. I mean, there might be some people who want to experiment with better ways to use what is otherwise wasted. But for the most part, we know that you put gas or diesel in your car, and you put propane or natural gas or wood in your stove. The wrong fuel will create problems. Same thing with our bodies. That's why we're asking you to just try it out for 6 weeks. Don't worry about losing weight. Worry about feeding your brain. Make your brain healthier, and you will find yourself thinking more clearly. Just try it out. See what happens. After 6 weeks, you might decide that really was worth it. Now, I know maintaining variety is difficult for some people. I mean, we all have our favorite foods, and some of us would like to eat the same food every day. I know for breakfast, I have the same thing every day. Some children are really worse about that than adults, but we adults, we know what we like, and so we eat what we like, and so we have forgotten about variety as well. So the Daniel Plan is about choosing 1 or 2 things to change. Maybe one of the things you want to work on is variety. I mean, when I grew up, when many of us grew up, they talked about having a square meal, right? With meat and vegetables and grains and dairy products. So 4 different things. They've changed it now. The government has come up with a plate. I got a picture of the plate. I think I do. Should be in the slides. Anyway, you've seen go ahead, put that plate up. There we go. Half of the plate is fruits and vegetables. A quarter is low-fat proteins, and a quarter is grain. Now, I know for me, as I look at what I eat in a typical day, I try to measure how close am I to that, and typically I'm about 60% accurate. My goal in the Daniel Plan is to get to at least 75% on a regular basis. It's a small incremental change that makes a difference over time. It takes practice. It's one thing I'm choosing to improve. But maybe even that's too hard for you. So then I would offer to you the plan that maybe is more fun. It's the rainbow plan. And that is, every day I want to eat 6 different colors of food. I don't know. We got tomatoes and avocados, eggplant, squash. We could put some, let's see, what other color is up here? Some garlic or cauliflower and maybe a piece of beef. 6 different colors. Maybe you want to eat some of those at breakfast and some of them at dinner and get the other colors at lunch. Have some fun with it. Try things out that you don't think you like. Sometimes we have adult taste buds and we taste those things we didn't think we liked and suddenly we do. One year, a few years ago, Ron and I were part of a co-op where we got vegetables from a community garden every week, whatever was being produced that week. There were things in there that we had never eaten before. There were things in there that when we were kids we didn't like. We ate them anyway. And we found out some of them we do like and some of them we still don't like. But we didn't know that until we tried them. Maybe you want to try a new food every week just to see what's out there that you haven't tried before. There are some things out there you've probably never eaten that you might really, really like. When Jesus turns the water into wine, we don't see what happens. We just see that it has happened. We find it out when that first glass is poured. I mean, can you imagine what it's like for that servant who takes the water out of the thing and then gives it to the head waiter and it's turned to wine? I mean, the head waiter doesn't know where it came from, but that servant does. He just filled that jar. I can't imagine what that's like to see suddenly things being changed right before our eyes. It doesn't say one way or the other, but I began to wonder, 6 different jars, I wonder if there's 6 different kinds of wine, a red and a white and everything in between. I mean, God provides variety anyway, and God provides an enormous abundance. Now, it's important not to become gluttons with that abundance, but the Daniel plan reminds us that everything God made is good. Thanks be to God. Amen.